Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 30th of November, the start day of COP 28 of UNFCCC in UAE. Now in yesterday's session, we've covered the important, I would say, COPs, the details of COP 27 which happened last year in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt. Now, before this year's COP, which is starting today, in June this year, there was a convention, I would say a springboard or a build up to this COP 28, which starts today. This meeting happened in the city of Bonn. That is why it was known as the Bonn Climate Meet. It was, I would say, an intermittent meet between COP 27 and COP 28. So this happened in June 2023, where all the leaders or all the parties who are part of UNFCCC, we've seen that there are 198 countries who are members of UNFCCC. They all met in this Bonn Climate Meet. What was discussed? The global stocktake. It was discussed. What is global stocktake? It was mandated by the Paris, I would say, Pact, which happened in 2015, COP21, and this, is an assessment exercise which has to start from 2023 and has to happen once in 5 years. It will make an assessment, or it will, do an assessment exercise to all our efforts which we are taking for tackling or managing global warming or climate change. Assessment should be there, and without assessments, things should not proceed. Then next is mitigation work program. Mitigation work program, MWP, it was envisaged in 2021 COP 26. It happened in the city of Glasgow, UK. This mitigation works program actually aims at mitigating the disastrous impact of climate change or global warming, and how that mitigation will happen only and only if we focus on reducing our emissions. So this mitigation works program focuses on reducing emissions. And we have this very important, the developed versus developing debate on climate change. And this developed versus developing debate has been going on since 1997, I would say, the inception of Kyoto Protocol, where the world was divided into developed and developing or underdeveloped. The developed countries have more, I would say, responsibilities. The developed countries were imposed some obligations. So, this kind of conflict line is there existing with respect to this climate change. We'll see in detail over here what this line is. Now, the Bonn Climate Meet. A Bonn Climate Meet can be considered as, I would say, a prerequisite to COP, or I would say an intermediate meeting of all the UNFCCC members between the two COPs. COP 27, which happened last year November, COP 28, which starts today, that is 30th of November 2023. In between, in June 2023, this Bonn Climate Meet happened, where all the members who are part of UNFCCC, joined in this. What was the major agenda? That what things we are going to discuss in this year's COP, which is going to happen in UAE. So, that was there. One of the, key agendas was global stocktake. Global stocktake is basically an assessment, I would say, program in which, or according to which, we need to assess what kind of efforts we are doing for climate change and what impact our efforts are making. And this is going to be a universal, I would say, formula, or universal standards are going to be set in global stocktake, where all the countries can use this global stocktake to, measure their contributions and its impact. This was discussed, and finally this will come into picture in COP 28, hopefully. And this assessment exercise has to be done once in 5 years. Other discussions were around mitigation works program, where we have to mitigate the impact of climate change or global warming. And how to mitigate? The immediate response would be to reduce emissions or to intensify emission cuts. So this is what this is going to be MWP. But in this Bonn climate meet, there was a debate which was again sparked off. That debate, developed versus developing. We'll look into that as well. So let us get into the details of this Bonn climate meet. Prior to UNFCCC's COP28, Dubai, representatives from countries around the world met in Bonn, Germany for climate negotiations. This was the first full in-person meeting since COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Agenda: at Bonn, delegates were tasked with laying the groundwork ahead of a global stocktake that will see nations assessing their progress towards climate goals. Bonn was expected to act as springboard for accelerated climate action. Now, what is global stocktake? You are making efforts, everyone is making efforts for climate change, let's suppose. But actually, what is the impact? And actually, are you making those efforts or not? Or are you simply greenwashing? Greenwashing is a term which is used where you say that all your projects are climate friendly or environment friendly, and actually they are not environment friendly to that extent which you are claiming them to be. That term is called as greenwashing. So this global stocktake is kind of a standard formula which every country, developed, developing, underdeveloped, will be adopting to assess what their efforts have been and what is the impact of their efforts. That is nothing but global stocktake. It was mandated by the 2015 Paris Agreement. GST, this is not goods and services tax, it is global stocktake. It is an exercise aimed at assessing the progress in fight against climate change and deciding ways and means to enhance global action to bridge adequacy gap. It has to start in 2023 and once in every 5 years it has to happen. So between 2023 and 2028, once again it will happen. What was decided with respect to this GST in Bonn? The third and final round of technical discussions on GST was wrapped up. The technical discussions just produced a short framework on the elements to be included in the stocktake exercise. The actual substance in GST would come at COP28, the year ending in climate change in this conference. So the actual substance would be here, and we will definitely be covering this if it will be available in public domain, that what is going to be GST, how measurements have to be taken, have to be done. What is global stocktake? It was mitigation works program. Next point is, now mitigation means reducing. And how to reduce? To reduce emissions, you reduce global warming. Or you intensify emission cuts, you reduce or you mitigate global warming. Discussions at MWP ran into trouble after developing countries complained that while they were being asked to strengthen their climate actions, developed countries were yet to offer enabling finance and technology transfers. Developing countries are saying that you are telling us to mitigate, you are telling us to reduce emissions. Reducing emissions will be equal to reducing development. And we are ready to contribute in climate change, the developing countries are saying. But we cannot stop our development. Let's suppose we need electricity for doing any economic activity. So we are producing electricity by burning coal. If you want us to produce electricity by renewable energy, you give us the finance, you give us the money, developed countries. We will, install solar parks over here in our country. We'll produce electricity and we'll develop also from that. So it is kind of a middle path where you also walk some, we also walk some. It is like this. So this is the developed countries are under an obligation to support the implementation of climate action plans of developing countries through money and tech transfers. This obligation, COP 15, 2009, Copenhagen, $100 billion per year. Developing countries including India have said they would be able to act more if international support in the form of money and technology transfer was made available to them. Otherwise, mitigation is going to be difficult from our end. What is mitigation works program? Apart from GST, this is another mechanism that was set up at COP26 in Glasgow in 2021 for climate action. This is a temporary emergency exercise focused only on increasing emission cuts. So emission cuts has to be increased. Now this debate, developed versus developing. Historical emissions. We've seen that from industrial revolution era, that started in 19th century, Western European countries, American countries, they were, taking advantage of this industrial revolution. They were emitting a lot. If you talk about rivers like the Thames, it was heavily polluted at that time. And due to those emissions, due to that industrial revolution, these countries which were developing or underdeveloped that time, they became developed. They did the emissions which are causing global warming till date. Yes, you heard it right. One molecule of carbon dioxide, when it is emitted, it stays in the atmosphere for 150 to 200 years. Yes, you heard me right. Again. Means a carbon dioxide molecule which was emitted 150 years ago is still causing global warming today. And who emitted at that time? These developed countries of today. The developing countries of today, like India, China, and all, they were mostly colonies of these developed countries only. These developed countries did not let these colonies to develop. That is why you will see minimum, industrialization in India by the Britishers. But industrialization did not happen up to that extent in India. That happened in England at that time when India was a colony of the Britishers. So we were not allowed to develop as such. And now is our time. We are now actually the fastest developing economy of the world. We are doing a lot of emissions also. China is doing a lot of emissions. China is the world's largest emitter. USA is the second largest, India is the third largest emitter. But developing countries like China and India, we do not have this moral responsibility because we did not contribute in historical emissions. The developed countries did. The developed countries of today did. The developed countries of today say that at that time when we did the emissions, we did not have any alternates to fossil fuels. So we could not adopt them. We had to do them. We had no other option. If we see their part of the argument, that is also okay. That is also right, logical. But again, things come down to climate finance. Okay, you have developed, you have done the historical emissions, global warming is happening due to you today. You should give the money at least. Climate finance. $100 billion goal from 2020 onwards. Not even a single year has been witnessing $100 billion being transferred from 2020 onwards. The maximum transfer is $83.4 billion in a year. And that too, according to some reports, it is inflated. This figure is inflated by the developed countries. Means actual amount transferred is less. Most of the amount to the developing and underdeveloped countries is given as loans, which they have to repay back. That too with interest. Only merely 5% is given as grants. Is this justifiable? Sorry to say it is not. So that is something which we need to see in detail. Now the discussion on GST resulted into disagreement between developed and developing over provisions related to finance and technology transfer and historical responsibility. Historical responsibility, bulk of accumulated greenhouse gas emissions, the reason for global warming have come from a group of about 40 rich and industrialized countries. These countries were identified as Annexure 1 countries at the 1992 UNFCCC that happened in Rio de Janeiro. And 1997, 5 years down the line, Kyoto Protocol made some obligations on them also, the developed countries. This historical responsibility has been the basis for differentiated burden sharing on developed and developing countries in climate change network. Now the money matter. According to IPCC, global emissions have to come down by 43% from 2019 levels by 2030 to keep alive the hopes of meeting the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, and this target has to be met by 2100. Means if we have to meet this target by 2100, 1.5 degrees Celsius, x plus 1.5 degrees Celsius, which we discussed in yesterday's video, by 2030, emissions have to come down by 43% of 2019 levels. Now, for this, developing countries need as much as US $6 trillion. And what amount is coming? $100 billion per year. That too not completely it has come. And it has to be there in this long. The loss and damage needs of developing countries is $400 billion every year. Every year this much damage is happening in developing and underdeveloped countries. For that also we need money. Now against this, even a minuscule looking $100 billion per year that the developed countries had committed to raise from 2020 is not fully, available. That is also available in less quantity. So this is something which needs to be considered. Arguments by the developed world. What they say? They say that historical emissions happened at a time when we had no alternates to fossil fuels. They are right. Now, since 1992, they say that 57% of the carbon dioxide emissions had come from non-Annex 1 countries, means developing and underdeveloped countries. 70% of incremental warming since 1992 due to emissions from carbon dioxide, methane and sulfur dioxide come from non-Annex 1 countries, means developing and underdeveloped. As I told you that China is the world's largest emitter, India is the world's third largest emitter. Okay. Both of these are non-Annex 1 countries. While maintaining that developed countries would take the lead in climate action, bridging the adequacy gap was not the sole responsibility of the developed nations, and that it would not agree to references, pre-2020 commitments to the GST, means everyone should be responsible. What they want to say is this. But again, the things come down to climate finance. The developing countries, means non-annexure countries, are saying that we are ready, but we need the finance. We don't have the finance. You have the finance. You have to give it to us. Then only we will be able to collectively tackle this. And this $100 billion is not sufficient. You're not even giving that, $100 billion. That is why we need to upgrade it. The IPCC's response, or IPCC's study also says that $6 trillion are needed. So we need the money. And for that, this new collective quantified goal, NCQG, is being discussed among the leaders. This NCQG is going to replace the current climate finance goal of $100 billion. Why? Because it needs it. This new collective quantified goal was, agreed to in 2015 Paris Climate Agreement for climate financing prior to 2025. Prior to 2025, we have to adopt this NCQG. If we do not adopt this, then, there will be again disastrous consequences, because the developing and underdeveloped countries, they will not be available with finance. And this NCQG can be discussed in this year's COP also. So keep an eye on this. The need for a new finance goal, obviously we need it, because first of all, $100 billion is not coming. They are less, and whatever is coming, this is coming $83.3 billion, which is inflated by 225% according to, Oxfam analysis. No, this was seen largely as a political goal also. Just to pacify the developing and underdeveloped countries, this $100 billion goal was kept without any, I would say, concrete research behind this. So that needs to change, and the new goal will be NCQG, that is new collective quantified goal. How much it will be? Cannot say. By when it will be? Cannot say, but yes, it has to be formed before 2025. If it does not form, then obviously there will be again problems. The economic growth of developed countries has come at the cost of high carbon emissions, and thus they are obligated to shoulder greater responsibility. And that greater responsibility is in the form of greater finance. So this has to be there. Funds available for climate finance have quantitatively increased. Climate-induced disasters have increased, and these disasters are impacting the small island nations specifically. And all these small island nations, majority of them, they are underdeveloped or developing, means they are non-annexure countries. They need to be there. According to Center for Science and Environment, 5% of climate finance, which comes from developed countries to developing and underdeveloped countries, it comes in the forms of grants, means this does not have to be returned back. The rest 95% through loans and equity. Loans and equity means they have to be given back in the developing countries with a debilitating debt crisis in the developing countries. Countries most in need of finances have to wait for years to access money, pay interest, high rates, and increase their debt burdens. So this is something which is not morally correct also. So this needs to be understood. And with this, we've completed all the, I would say, foundation work for you to understand the outcomes of this COP28, which happens or which starts today. So keep reading the newspapers for this, and we'll also be covering details about this over here in our daily session videos. Apart from it, we'll also be covering other topics, not only on COP we'll be focusing on. So this is going to happen, and this is it from today's session. You very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing. Most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.